His name was Two Shank Shorty, and I've done a video about him before, and I'll share it in the comments section. So check it out if you want to get some more stories that are just crazy about Two Shank Shorty. Anyway, so I go up to Two Shank Shorty because he's getting a tattoo. I said, say, I heard you're getting a tattoo. You know, you're going over to so-and-so's dorm. He told me he got you all hooked up. I said, what you getting? He said, I'm getting that MOB, baby. I said, you getting MOB? I said, why you getting MOB? He said, you know what it is? Money over broads. Except, you know, it ain't broads, it's beaches. You know, money over beaches, you heard me? I said, yeah, I hear you. I said, but you ain't no pimp. He said, say, player, you don't know nothing about me like that. That's the thing. Y'all come up in this prison, you heard me? And y'all do time with me for about 1 or 2 years, and y'all think y'all know something about me. I said, man, I know everything about you, man. I said, you ain't got no broads like that, so why would you get money over broads? I said, furthermore, you ain't got no money. He said, that's what your mind say, that's what your mouth say, but your heart don't know me that well. I said, how my heart don't know you that well, bro? He said, because I've been had money. I said, how you got money? He said, bro, I used to keep a job on the street, you heard me? He said, I used to work at the convenience store right there up the block, bro. I used to help them people pump that gas, you heard me? I said, how much they paid you? He said, man, I was making more than minimum wage. Like, I was making like $7 to $6. I said, $7 or $6? He said, yeah, up to $7, probably low as $6. I said, low as $6? I said, man, that's less than minimum wage, bro. He said, say, bro, quit playing with me, you heard me? That's the thing you don't know. I didn't know what minimum wage was, so it really ain't matter to me too much. I said, it didn't matter to you too much. I said, man, you got to change your life, Joe. You know, they call him Two Shank Shorty, but, you know, his name was Joe. Or they call him Mange Head because they said he had the mange, you know what I mean? I said, let me tell you something, bro. Don't get that tattoo. You're going to regret that tattoo. He said, say, bro, I tell you what we gonna do. We gonna call my boy over here and we gonna ask him if I should get the tattoo. So we call another dude in the dorm over there. He comes sit next to us and I said, say, bro, Joe said he gonna get the tattoo MOB. He said, MOB? He said, Joe, you ain't got no money and you ain't got no broads. He said, say, bro, y'all all keep telling me that, bro, but y'all don't know me like that. I said, Joe, when you ever had money? He said, I had a lot of money, bro. He said, you might not believe this, but when my uncle was breaking them houses and stealing all that stuff so he can get that crack, one day I took all the money he had. I said, you took his money? He said, yeah, he took my woman. I took his money. I said, how much money you took? He said, man, I took $272, bro. I had all that in my pocket at one time. So how you gonna tell me that they ain't money over broads? He said, when I had that $272, he said, I went up there, man. I went to the strip club, man. I got all ones. I said, you got ones? He said, I got $272 in ones. I said, what you did with it? He says, shoot, I ain't even get a drink. I put it all on them broads. So you know it's money over broads. I said, that's not what that means, Joe. He said, what it mean then? I said, you can't say you're going to get an MOB, which is a mob tattoo, if you spending all your money on the broads, because now it's the broads over the money. He says, too, well, I'm going to get bombed then. I said, bomb? Yeah, broads over money. He said, well, what should I get tattooed on me? I said, you got to get something tattooed on you that's authentic to you, to who you are. You know what I mean? He said, so what would you get? He said, I tell you what, bro, you draw me a tattoo and that's what I'm going to get. I said, I ain't going to draw you no tattoo, man, because I think somebody should get a tattoo that they like. Find out what you like and come up back with it to it. He said, all right, bet. So he goes tell the dude, he said, I told him, bro, I'm going to have something by the time tattoo day come. I said, all right, cool. So he comes back the next day and he sits on the bunk and we sitting down chopping up. I got a cup of coffee. He got a cup of coffee. Running ups. I said, what you got? You decided what you gonna get that tattoo of? He said, man, I gave it a lot of thought. You right, bro. I'm glad you and so-and-so told me not to get that MOB, bro, that bomb. Because, you know, that wouldn't have been a good fit for me personally. I said, I knew it, but I felt it in my heart, you heard me? But I really needed somebody who was going to put me on my game like that, you heard me? I said, I hear you, bro. I said, so what you going to get tattooed on you now? He said, I'm getting right here on my neck, head buster. I said, head buster? I said, you know what head buster means? He said, you better believe I know what head buster means. It means I'm busting all them busters' heads, you know what I mean? They ain't going to play with me. They going to get the cap peeled back. You know what I mean? I split your wig, dog. I said, you ain't split nobody's wig. I said, how many fights you been into in your life, Joe? He said, man, shoot. He said, I got in a fight with my uncle when he was trying to steal my old lady. I got in that fight, bet you that. So I'm a head buster for real. I said, so you beat your uncle. And dudes knew his uncle from jail, from back around where he was staying at. Dude said, so you beat your uncle? He said, you better believe I beat my uncle until he got a hold of me. I mean, I snuck him, but when he got me, he whooped me. He said, so basically that make me a head buster, right? I said, that don't make you no head buster, man. Go find a tattoo that fits you accordingly. He said, so basically you saying no on the head buster. I said, everybody's saying no on the head buster. Don't put that on your neck, man. You're going to regret that. So here we go. The day of the tattoo. He comes up to me again. I was real good friends with Joe, you know what I mean? He called himself Two Shank Shorty, you know? So he come up to me and says, say, bruh, I finally figured out when I'm getting tattooed on me. You heard me? He said, I'm saying no to the MOB, not the money over bras. He said, I ain't going to get the head buster tattooed on my neck. He said, I know when I'm going to get tattooed on me. I said, what you going to get tattooed on you? He said, I'm going to get Teresa. I said, you can get Teresa? He said, yeah. I said, you already got Teresa's name tattooed 5 times on you. He said, that's all good, bro. He said, when I don't know what to tat on me, I just tattoo Teresa's name. I'm like, cool, man. At least that fits you, Joe. I know you never been intimately with this woman, and she's got children from both your uncles and one of your cousins, and you in love with her, and you know what I mean? You're going to take care of all her kids, none of them which are yours. They're all your second cousins and all that. But at least I know that Teresa fits you because you in love with the woman. He said, say, bro, one thing y'all don't know about me, bro. He said, she don't love my uncles, bro. She really loved me. I said, she been sleeping with all your uncles, bro. But she loves you? He said, yeah, bro. I kind of know it in my heart. That's why I'm going to get her tattooed. Her name tattooed on my neck. I said, don't tattoo that lady's name on your neck. Put it on your leg, man, when you get a cover up later. Sure enough, he got Teresa tattooed right there on his leg. Say, bro, how you like the tattoo? The Teresa. I looked. I said, why there ain't no H in it? He said, what you mean no H? And he looked, there was no H in Teresa. You dude tattooed Teresa on him without the H. And I'm like, Joe, you didn't look at the spelling? He's like, nah, I didn't look at the spelling. I was too busy sipping on that coffee, bro. He said, oh, man. I said, look at the other Teresas that you got tattooed on you. You dude had her name tattooed everywhere. He looks. He's like, dang, how dude made that mistake? He said, but I'm going to go check that dude. And I knew the dude who was doing the tattoos. I said, you ain't going to check that dude. Dude's going to bat you in your mouth. He said, oh, man, what I should do about it, bro? I said, when you get home, man, just get it covered up. He said, oh, man, I ain't really worrying about it, bro. I'm going to leave it there anyway. I'm going to find me somebody else named Teresa. I said, you got 5 Teresas? He said, yeah. Every time I go somewhere, I'm just going to be like, man, that's my daughter name. I'm like, you ain't got no daughter. He said, if I have one, I'm going to name her Teresa 5 times over. You heard me? Hootie-hoo! And this was a little wild dude, and that's just the way it went. Welcome to the Pen and the Shank, the most unusual and unique crime and prison channel experience on YouTube, where you get some unusual stories like Two Shank Shorty getting tattoos that he don't know what he's getting. Man, let's get this.